Okay, folks, thank you all for being here. I think we're going to get started. It's wonderful for you all to have shared your Sunday afternoon with us. We really appreciate it. It means you really don't want New Mexico to become a national nuclear sacrifice area, so we really appreciate you. And to begin, we're going to have an acknowledgement. My name is Robin. I'm a co-host with Eileen O'Shaughnessy from DNA, Demand Nuclear Abolition. DNA, yes, it's in our DNA.
Hi, everybody. Yes, my name is Eileen O'Shaughnessy, and I'm a co-founder of a grassroots anti-nuclear collective based in Albuquerque on Tiwa land there. And I want to just say, first of all, before we begin, that we are on occupied Tiwa lands here in what's called Santa Fe. And that's really important to say because with nuclear issues, indigenous peoples are on the forefront, and the process of nuclear colonialism is ongoing. And really the goal of this work is to challenge nuclear colonialism, the violence of radioactive materials which harm communities of color and indigenous people the most.
Thanks, Eileen. Thanks for that, Eileen. And we have other thanks. I'd like to thank the Courtyard by Marriott and specifically Phyllis Ortiz-Hilborn for helping us today put this together. Yes, thank you, Phyllis. Santa Fe Audiovisual, Chris and Bobby, thank you so much for being here and helping with the sound and the Zoom and everything else. Available Media, Bob Ailey, thank you. There'll be stuff up on the web and live streamed. And also I want to thank all our coalition members. So Concerned Citizens for Nuclear Safety, Southwest Research and Information Center, Vets for Peace, Nork Watch, Citizens for Alternatives to Radioactive Dumping, and I also really want to acknowledge Deborah Reed from CCNS and CARD because she has really spearheaded this, so kudos to Deborah. Cecilia Chavez is our Spanish interpreter. She is on Zoom. If you're a Spanish speaker, hopefully at the registration table you picked up your little translation box to plug into your ear so that you get it in Spanish, and folks on Zoom also will have that. We have a couple of PowerPoints. You can see our agenda. This is our welcome and introductions. We have the What is WIPP PowerPoint, the What is WIPP expansion, a short question and answer period, a little break, the permit and public participation PowerPoints, some discussion from our panel, and then some more questions and answers, and we hope that you will write your letters today so that we can scan them in and get them all to New Mexico Environment Department. The deadline for your comments is Wednesday, April 19th, so that's coming right up. So let's see, what else do I have to tell you? Here's my crib sheet. One other thing is sometimes on the narration for the PowerPoints, the Spanish can take a little longer. And so you might have an extra beat or an extra breath before we say next slide, just to make sure that all the Spanish has gotten in there. So don't be surprised if there's a pause before next slide. And with that, we're going to go to our first PowerPoint presentation. Eileen, what is WIPP? Take it away, girl.
Right. All right. So this first PowerPoint is going to go over what WIPP is, the Waste Isolation Pilot Plant. Many people have forgotten about WIPP in the last 20 years. So the first question is, what is WIPP? WIPP is the Waste Isolation Pilot Plant, a radioactive and hazardous waste dump site 26 miles east of Carlsbad in southeastern New Mexico. WIPP is the first and only deep geologic repository for radioactive waste in the world. WIPP's mission is to permanently dispose of waste forever, or at least keep it separated from the accessible environment for 10,000 years. It is called a pilot plant because it was supposed to be the first of multiple repositories. It was designed only to dispose of a portion of the defense radioactive waste inventory, Other sites were to be developed to receive the rest of that inventory and for waste generated in the future. Next slide. So who owns WIPP? The U.S. Department of Energy, or DOE, operates WIPP and controls the 16-mile square site. WIPP has received waste from more than 20 sites around the country that have generated plutonium-contaminated waste. Next slide. Generator sites. These generator sites store, characterize, and package waste for shipment to WIPP. Los Alamos National Laboratory, or LANA, in northern New Mexico, not far from where we are, is the main generator site in our state. Waste is shipped by truck. Next slide. The WIPP facility, as originally conceived, includes surface structures where waste is received, temporarily stored, and sent to the underground. The mine, or the underground, is where waste is placed for permanent disposal. 4 shafts connect the two, as you can see here. Next slide. Surface structures include the waste handling building, where waste is received, unpacked, and sent underground for disposal. Various ventilation intake and exhaust openings. The exhaust filter building, where underground air can be filtered. The surface parking lot and a storage area for waste waiting to be unloaded. And the salt storage area for salt excavated from the underground to be used again during closure of the facility, and that's salt from an ancient sea. Next slide. The underground repository is excavated 2,150 feet below the surface and was originally planned to have 8 waste panels made up of 7 rooms each, arranged along the main corridors. Each panel was to be about 300 feet long, 33 feet wide, and 13 feet high, about the length and width of a football field. The areas between the main corridors, also known as drifts, were called panels 9 and 10, and were to be filled as WIPP was being closed. Next slide. As shown on the right, contact-handled waste is stacked in the rooms after the hotter remote-handled waste, shown on the left, is robotically placed in pre-drilled holes in the room res. More recently, some remote-handled waste has been put into lead-shielded containers and stacked with the contact-handled waste. Next slide. WIPP's original design included 4 shafts. The construction and salt handling shaft is used during salt excavation, construction, and eventual closure of the corridors, panels, and rooms. Number 2, the waste shaft is used to move waste from the waste handling building to the underground. Number 3, the air intake shaft sends fresh air to the underground ventilation system. And number 4, the exhaust shaft. Originally, air was exhausted to the environment from the underground through this shaft. Exhausted air could be filtered through a bank of HEPA filters if there was a radiation release. Next slide. On Valentine's Day, 2014, a notorious day, I had a bad Valentine's Day that year as well, 1 or more waste drums exploded in the WIPP underground in row 7 of panel 7, releasing radioactive and hazardous waste into the environment and contaminating the mine and part of the exhaust shaft. 22 workers were also contaminated above ground. 9 days before, there had been a truck fire underground, which resulted in the evacuation of all underground personnel at the time, so that no one was in underground when the release occurred. After the accident, no waste was shipped to or disposed at WIPP for 3 years. The explosion was caused by improper waste packaging at Los Alamos National Labs, the generating site for this waste. The wrong kind of kitty litter was added to the waste to absorb liquids. This turned the waste into an explosive mixture. Several hundred of these drones had already been disposed of at WIPP. Next slide. Because parts of the underground and the exhaust shaft were contaminated after the accident, all air had to be filtered through the HEPA filters. This greatly reduced the amount of underground ventilation and the amount of work that could be done in the mine. Though WIPP's motto at the beginning was, quote, "start clean and stay clean," eventually, WIPP started bypassing the filters and exhausting contaminated air while doing some underground tasks. This continues to be a practice today. Since the radiation release, there has been new construction that is part of the WIPP expansion. This includes a new 5th shaft that is being excavated as we speak, west of the repository footprint. At first, DOE refused to acknowledge that the new shaft had any use other than for ventilation, but now DOE calls it a utility shaft and says that it will be used for new construction and a waste hoist in the future. Next slide. The current WIPP site was designed in 1975. After the first site a few miles away was abandoned because of unpredictable geology. Previously, a site near Lyons, Kansas had been selected, but it was abandoned because of unpredictable geology and opposition from Kansas officials. Other states declined to be considered. However, a few local people in Carlsbad requested that the federal government consider this area. All of those sites were in salt formations because salt creeps or closes in on itself, and it was believed that salt creep would encapsulate the waste underground forever, far from the surface and the accessible environment. Next slide. In addition to predictable geology, a major siting criteria was to avoid resource extraction, potash, oil, and gas that existed in the region, because such drilling and mining would increase the likelihood of human intrusion into WIPP that could release radioactivity. In 1975, there was little drilling within 10 miles of the site in 1975. But now, WIPP is surrounded by resources and resource extraction. There are potash reserves above WIPP and oil and gas below it. There are more than 500 oil and gas wells within 2.5 miles of WIPP, and thousands of wells in the larger Permian Basin area. DOE can prevent any drilling within the 16 square mile WIPP site, the gray area in the slide, but only for as long as it can maintain control of the area. Another important siting criteria was to avoid earthquakes. It's a good idea. But some of the wells use hydraulic fracturing or fracking that could allow liquids to move into the waste underground. Fracking can also create earthquakes that could affect the integrity of WIPP. Next slide. There are some other reasons why some people have always considered the WIPP site to be unsuitable. Number one, the WIPP facility is sited in one of the largest karst areas in the United States. Karst geology develops when the underground rocks are dissolved away by water. This allows liquids to move quickly through fractures, channels, and caverns in the dissolved rock. Number two, the salt surrounding WIPP is not pure, but is crossed, sometimes for hundreds of miles, by rock layers called interbeds, where liquids can also travel more quickly. WIPP is located close between two interbeds. Number three, underneath WIPP is a large pocket of brine, highly pressurized by hydrogen sulfide gas. Breaching this pocket by drilling through the salt could bring quantities of brine into the underground and perhaps into the accessible environment. The WIPP underground was rotated away from a WIPP drill hole that hit a large brine pocket, but part of the site still remains above this brine pocket. Next slide. For a more detailed description of the WIPP site and site geology, go to www.cardnm.org. There are both technical and non-technical sections available. Next slide. Now let's talk a little bit about the kind of waste that is disposed of in WIPP. First, there are three major types of nuclear waste. Number one, high-level waste, or spent nuclear fuel, is waste from reprocessing fuel rods and spent rods from commercial nuclear power plants, which we do not have in New Mexico, FYI. Number two, low-level waste is medical, industrial, or nuclear fuel cycle waste that doesn't fit into other waste categories. Number three, transuranic or true waste is waste that is contaminated with human-made radioactive elements heavier than uranium, like plutonium. This waste is mostly nuclear weapons waste. Next slide. Because of federal law and the consultation and cooperation agreement between DOE and New Mexico, only transuranic waste can come to WIPP. So now we'll introduce the transuranics who will be performing at the Kiva Auditorium tonight. Just kidding. I hope they're not. Transuranic elements are all human-made and radioactive and are circled in blue in the periodic table of elements shown here. They are all heavier than uranium in the red box. That is, they are beyond or uranic, on the periodic table of elements and have atomic numbers greater than uranium's number 92. Plutonium's atomic number is 94. Next slide. So what else is special about the WIPP waste? The radioactive waste disposed in WIPP is only transuranic, military waste generated in nuclear weapons research, testing, and production. The waste is not made up of pure transuranic elements, but is made up of things like gloves, booties, sledges, etc., that are contaminated by transuranic elements, mostly the element plutonium. Most WIPP waste is contact-handled transuranic waste, or CH-true, meaning it can be handled without special shielding. Some is remote-handled transuranic waste, or RH-true, meaning it is so radioactive that it must be handled robotically or with extra shielding. Most WIPP waste includes hazardous chemicals and materials and is defined as mixed waste. Waste created before WIPP opened in 1999 is often called legacy waste. But it was also newly generated waste as some generator sites continue to create new waste. For many years, DOE said that WIPP was primarily for cleaning up legacy waste, including legacy waste stored at Los Alamos National Laboratory. Next slide. So who regulates WIPP? The two most important regulators that have authority to allow WIPP to operate or not are the Environmental Protection Agency, or EPO, and the New Mexico Environment Department, or NMED. In 1998, EPA certified that WIPP was able to contain the radioactive waste buried there for 10,000 years after WIPP closes. Every 5 years, EPA must recertify that WIPP continues to meet that standard. However, consider this. The half-life of plutonium-239 is 24,000 years. That's how long it takes for only half of the volume of plutonium to change into something else. Even after 24,000 years, a quarter of the original volume of plutonium will still remain, along with many other dangerous radionuclides. Next slide. WIPP is regulated by the state of New Mexico through the New Mexico Environment Department, or NMED, under a federal law called RCRA, the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act, and a state law called the Hazardous Waste Act. These laws regulate hazardous waste and materials, including hazardous waste that is mixed with radioactive waste, like the WIPP mixed waste. Although not all WIPP waste is mixed waste, the state can still regulate WIPP as a hazardous waste facility because DOE and the state agreed to manage all the waste in WIPP as mixed waste, even if some of it didn't contain any hazardous materials. NMED does this by issuing an operating permit to WIPP, regulating how WIPP must operate, what kind of waste it can receive, how it should be built, and how it should be closed. The original operating permit for WIPP was issued in 1999 for a period of 10 years and has been modified more times and renewed once. We are in the middle of such a renewal process right now. Next slide. NMED regulation is important because WIPP cannot operate without a permit from the state. And during the renewal process, you, friends, can comment on the draft permit. NMED must consider your comments if they are received before the end of the comment period, which is 5 o'clock on Wednesday, April 19th, this coming Wednesday. Many conditions in the existing permit have resulted from public comments in the past, so you can have an effect on WIPP's future. Toward the end of this conference, you will be able to write your own comments to NMED. WIPP's application for permit renewal makes some significant changes that will expand WIPP in several ways. Expansion will include expanding WIPP's size or underground footprint, the amount of waste it can hold, the kind of waste it can hold, how long it can operate before it is closed, and how many additional shipments of waste on our highways there will be. We call this WIPP expansion, and that is the subject of the next presentation. And I'm going to invite Joni Ahrens, the Director of Concerned Citizens for Nuclear Safety.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for being here and thanks for being on the Zoom. I'm going to speak about what is WIPP expansion. Before New Mexico consented to allow WIPP to be sited here, the state negotiated with DOE to put limits in place that would curb impacts from the project. This was the state's way of telling the powerful DOE that it would stop roofing creep and federal overreach. These limits are encoded in the legally binding agreements, permits, and laws like the WIPP Land Withdrawal Act and the Consultation and Cooperation Agreement, or CNC Agreement. These are still the law today. Next slide. Now DOE wants to change and expand these limits and break the promises they made to us, but convinced New Mexico to cite WIPP in our state. They have already started adding changes by modifying the permit bit by bit over the last few years. Now they want to add the whole expansion package. This package includes 5 ways DOE wants to change these limits. 1. Making WIPP the only repository for the nation's nuclear weapons waste. 2. Expanding WIPP's size or footprint. 3. Expanding the volume of waste at WIPP. 4. Expanding waste operations from 2024 to forever. 5. Expanding the kind of waste to include powdered surplus plutonium. This is WIPP expansion. Next slide. WIPP is supposed to be a pilot plant only, the waste isolation pilot plant. DOE and Congress promised New Mexico that WIPP would be the first of several repositories located and built in other states. From the very beginning, WIPP was purposely not designed to hold the entire inventory of defense transuranic waste. We were not supposed to bear the sole burden of disposing of the nation's nuclear weapons waste. Despite their promises, DOE now has no plans for other repositories. However, the draft renewal permit currently includes a provision that requires DOE to report annually on its progress in citing another repository. That provision could finally result in serious action to keep this promise. Next slide. WIPP was designed to be a specific size or footprint with a specific number of waste panels, waste rooms, corridors, and shafts. This footprint, along with limits on the volume and kind of waste allowed, all work together to help demonstrate that WIPP can contain the waste for at least 10,000 years, as required by EPA standards. Next slide. DOE now wants to expand WIPP size so that the entire existing defense true waste inventory can be buried in WIPP. But Government Accountability Office, or GAO, has reported that WIPP's original design, which is in the blue area on the map, does not have enough space to dispose of this entire inventory. Their 2020 map shows WIPP's plans to more than double the amount of disposal space underground. This expansion, shown in green, will be in the western part of the site. DOE has already started this expansion by building a fifth utility shaft, circled in red on the map, in anticipation of building at least 9 additional panels and corridors in that area. The first of these, panels 11 and 12, are included in the permit renewal application and in the draft permit. Next slide. WIPP's waste volume is limited to 6.2 million cubic feet of transuranic waste. This volume was originally measured as the volume of the outer container of each waste package. 6.2 million cubic feet of waste would fill a space the size of more than 170 rooms like the one we're in right now. So important has it been that the volume limit be maintained that it was first written into the CNC agreement in 1987, then written into the Federal WIPP Land Withdrawal Act in 1992, and finally written into WIPP's RCRA operating permit in 1999. Next slide. $6.2 million cubic feet of waste continues to be the volume limit today, but in 2018, WIPP was able to modify the permit so that the way the waste volume was measured was changed. This is called the volume of record modification. Now, no matter how large the outer container, only the volume of the actual solid waste, not including the chemicals in the air inside the container, is measured. This allows WIPP to bury more waste than originally anticipated when WIPP was designed. You can see this difference in the National Academies of Science chart. The left column shows waste volume as originally measured. That is, by measuring the volume of the outer container. The right column shows the same waste measured in an array. WIPP says that even adding surplus plutonium waste, pit production waste, and future waste in red, light blue, and green in the chart won't go over the volume limit. However, as the chart shows, no matter how you measure the waste, that limit, as shown in the black horizontal line at 100%, will be broken and WIPP's volume will be expanded. Next slide. WIPP's current permit focuses on disposal of mature mixed waste over 25-year span. Let me say that again. WIPP's current permit focuses on disposal of true mixed waste over a 25-year span, plus 10 years for closure, keeping to what plan would end waste operations and begin closing the site in 2024. Now, DOE speaks of extending operations to at least 2080, to bury plutonium waste for future projects. This okay. You want me to say that again? Okay. Now DOE speaks of extending operations to at least 2080 to bury plutonium waste from future projects. This is 3 generations into the future, but in fact, WIPP's application to renew the permit included no end date at all, thus hoping to make WIPP truly forever WIPP. The Environment Department's draft renewal permit also does not specify an end date. It says that at the end of the permit term, or when the volume or room limits are reached, WIPP would close. But keeping WIPP open past 2024 would increase the risks of releases and exposures at the site and during shipping along WIPP's transportation routes. Next slide. As we've said, WIPP is allowed to accept only transuranic waste for disposal. Transuranic waste is made up of waste that is contaminated by transuranic elements like plutonium. Let me repeat that. True waste is waste that is contaminated by transuranic elements. It is not made up of concentrated plutonium itself. WIPP has always been prohibited from accepting concentrated plutonium metal like that in the plutonium pit or atomic bomb trigger you see on the right. Typical true waste, as you see on the left in these X-rayed drums, is instead made up of protective clothing, sludges, machinery, and tools that have been contaminated with plutonium. This WIPP waste is often referred to as gloves and booties. Next slide. U.S. presidents have declared 61.5 metric tons of plutonium not to be needed for nuclear weapons. Called surplus plutonium because it is considered surplus to current defense needs. This plutonium is too concentrated to be accepted as transuranic waste into WIPP. DOE's plan to dilute the plutonium so that it can become acceptable at WIPP. To do this, pits would first be shipped from the Pantex plant in Texas, where most of them are stored, to Lanil in northern New Mexico, where the pits will be oxidized or roasted and turned into a powder. Next, this powder will be shipped back across New Mexico and the country to the Savannah River site in South Carolina to be mixed and diluted with an adulterant, making it less concentrated and unusable in future weapons. Finally, the powder will be shipped back through our state a third time for disposal at WIPP. DOE says that this process will turn the concentrated plutonium into transuranic waste. Not everyone is so sure, but the draft permit does not address this issue. Next slide. Oh, yeah? It will be roasted there, oxidized. Okay. Yeah. And there's other folks in the audience who know how to answer those questions better than I do. So, okay. Okay. Tens of metric tons of concentrated plutonium is a lot of plutonium. EPA has shown concern about how this much plutonium in WIPP could mean for WIPP's integrity and has asked for more information. Surplus plutonium also increases risk to the public during transportation. Simply increasing the number of shipments in New Mexico and other states and increasing how long WIPP transportation will continue increases the likelihood of an accident with a release. By transporting plutonium as a powder also greatly increases the potential negative effects of such a release were it to occur. Because it was so easily inhaled, powdered plutonium is the most dangerous form of plutonium. Once inhaled, it stays in your lungs, continually irradiating your body. WIPP routes go through homes, go by our homes, schools, farms, and workplaces along I-25, I-40, and highways 285, 176, 18, 128, and 502. Do any of these roads and highways go by your neighborhood? If an accident with a release occurs before first responders can even arrive, you could have already breathed it in, and it could already be in your rivers, topsoil, and homes. Next slide. Even U.S. Senator Pete Domenici, a strong booster of WIPP from its very beginning, never wanted concentrated plutonium, like surplus plutonium, to be diluted and buried at WIPP. In 2002, he said, "I want to ensure that high-level waste can never be simply diluted in order to comply with criteria for WIPP disposal." For several years, the senator included prohibitions on concentrated plutonium in federal appropriation bills. But this dilute and dispose strategy is exactly what DOE wants to do with the surplus plutonium now. Next slide. There is no policy or plan to stop building nuclear weapons, which means there will always be more transuranic waste. Therefore, unless there are other repositories, WIPP has to operate and expand forever to dispose the never-ending shipments of waste. There are 5 main contributors to WIPP expansion: the volume of record modification, the 2014 explosion and other mismanagement at WIPP, the growing defense true waste inventory, adding surplus plutonium, and adding future plutonium pit production. Next slide. The volume of record modification's new way of measuring waste volume increases the need for more disposal space in the underground. But why is more space needed? Let's look at the GAO volume chart again. The right-hand column, measuring only the solid waste inside the containers, shows a far smaller amount of waste from all sources being buried at WIPP. However, looking at the column on the left, you can see that when you measure the volume of the outer containers holding this waste, burying the same amount of waste in WIPP requires a lot more space. This creates a need for more waste panels, more waste rooms, and expanded footprint for WIPP. And this is the most important point. It is still the physical size of the outer containers that drives how much disposal space actually needs to be excavated. Next slide. The 2014 explosion and other mismanagement have created a need to replace lost space in the repository. When the waste drum exploded underground, a significant area of the mine was contaminated. This contamination has resulted in a situation where areas of the underground can no longer be used for waste disposal. Additional space was wasted in the early panels because of mismanagement, including placing thousands of empty containers in the underground and closing some panels before they were completely filled. Now WIPP wants to justify excavating panels 11 and 12 as replacement panels for this lost space. After the construction of Utility Shaft 5, Panels 11 and 12 are the first of many panels planned to be built in the western area for expanded waste disposal there. Next slide. In order to bury more waste in the repository, WIPP plans to expand to the west and more than double the size of the underground. However, there are questions about the safety of expanding into the western part of the WIPP site. Even EPA has concerns. In 2021, they wrote to WIPP stating that not enough was known about the area and DOE needed to study or characterize the western area before EPA could sign off on WIPP's expansion plans. EPA also mentioned concerns about burying waste closer to the western boundary of the site, beyond which there is massive oil and gas development. Activities associated with extracting these resources can also threaten the integrity of the repository. Next slide. We've already seen that adding surplus plutonium to WIPP will help break waste volume limits. DOE also plans to produce new bomb triggers or plutonium pits at Lannel and at the Savannah River site. The additional transuranic waste from both of these projects will increase the number of waste shipments, the volume of waste at WIPP, and the need for more space underground for disposal. Another problem is that the pit production project and the dilute and dispose surplus plutonium project will include two major processes going on at WIPP at the same time. Yet Lannel has a long and continuing history of safety violations, some of them severe. Yet it is questionable if Lannel is capable of doing all this complicated and dangerous work at the same time without a radioactive release or contamination incident, especially when they describe their approach to safety by saying, safety is a journey where the destination is not important. Perhaps we should learn to properly manage the transuranic waste we already have before making more of it. Next slide. In summary, leaving WIPP as the only repository for defense transuranic waste and burying the ever-growing waste inventory there increases risks of release and exposure in several ways. Expanding the amount of plutonium in the repository increases the amount of plutonium that could be released if WIPP is drilled into or breached. Expanding the volume of waste and the number of waste containers requires WIPP's footprint to be expanded into the west, where the geology is unclear. It also puts the waste closer to oil and gas development, increasing the likelihood of a breach from these activities. Expanding the number of shipments and the length of time trucks are on the road increases the likelihood of an accident with a release. Even without an accident, this is where most New Mexicans will have contact with the WIPP project. And because a small amount of radiation penetrates through the transport containers, even during normal operations, more shipments over more time means more chances for people to be irradiated on highways, roads, and rest stops. Finally, expanding the kind of waste to include powdered surplus plutonium increases the negative effects of an accident with a release, and according to Sandia Labs, would make cleanup virtually impossible. Having seen the train accident in Ohio and learning about the contamination there, we know dangerous releases can happen. Though that was a train wreck and WIPP waste is transported by truck, a serious release can happen on our roads and in your neighborhoods, especially if more shipments over more time with riskier waste are allowed. So I want to thank you all for being here to hear this.
So thank you, Jody.
Yeah.
So we have a short question and answer period now. There will be more question and answers. We might take a little break for a few minutes. Some people had some questions. We have John Hancock is also in the audience. He's our technical support person. So is Scott Kovac from Link West. Some people were asking questions earlier. Yeah, do you want to take this mic so the people on Zoom can hear you?
Yeah, I was just wondering which is the most dangerous route. I know all of it is, but on the way to Lano or on the way from Texas to Lano and then Savannah?
Don, I would say they're all. There's not one that's more dangerous than another, but I would guess that they're all equally dangerous. I mean,
Actually,
Cindy, do you want to weigh in on that?
I'm not an expert, but my thinking is that the part of the journey going from Pantex to Lano and then Lano to South Carolina would be the most dangerous because it's not in a true pack truck, and we don't really know how well this other agency can handle that. And it's also not been adulterated, so that it's still something that a terrorist would find good bomb-making material, I would think.
And actually, I think the most dangerous would be from Lano to Savannah River because it has been turned into a powdered form at that point. So from Pantex to Lano, it's still solid, but it is, of course, of great desire to perhaps a terrorist. And then from Lano to Savannah River, it is powdered, and both of those routes, as she said, are not under the WIPP trucking requirements. From Savannah River to WIPP, it would be shipped in the WIPP trucks, so it's somewhat more safe, but it's still powdered if there's an accident.
So is there another question from the line, folks? I'd like to know if there are any questions on Zoom as well. Yes, on the back, please.
I have family in Roswell, and they're already experiencing earthquakes. So they notice the ones that make chairs on wheels roll across the room. So I wonder, are you all monitoring, or who would be monitoring the increased danger from earthquake activity?
Who would like to answer that? Don Hancock of Southwest Research and Information Center.
So there's not special monitoring going on. There's ongoing monitoring led by New Mexico Tech of earthquakes all over the state in the region, and the U.S. Geological Survey monitors as well. The concern, among the concerns I have about that is the Department of Energy view is that earthquakes like that are not going to affect in their belief. They believe that on the surface, the waste handling building can survive about a magnitude 6 earthquake, the building structure, and they feel like the south is solid enough that it's not going to make a difference. The concern, as already been said, is there are multiple ways that problems can happen. Earthquakes can soak the building, shake the underground, but also make these interbeds that we talked about able to transport fluids and liquids or waste under pressure. And of course, as more fracking happens, there are more earthquakes, but also more capability of fracturing the interbeds as well.
Big concern. Do you have any questions from Zoom?
Deborah Holt? Are we going to get to see her, or how is that going to work? Please unmute Deborah.
Oh, Deborah. Yeah. Hi. Hello. So I wanted to ask if anyone knows the exact route over 285 South, at what point trucks would actually enter it. Is it the northernmost point, which is like 2 miles from my house?
Route people, Cynthia? So it depends on what the waste is that you're asking about. All the waste that traditionally goes to WIPP leaves Los Alamos, goes along Highway 502, and then down around Santa Fe, along 599, and then on the southern part of Santa Fe, it travels Interstate 25, and then it goes down to the designated route, which is 285, so U.S. Highway 285, all the way down to WIPP. And so if you live anywhere in Santa Fe and there's a release of something that's, say, powdered, I think you are at risk. But if it's something that is the surplus plutonium, then that's going to be coming not all the way along Interstate 285. It's going to come along Interstate 40, past all those ranges and farms. And then when it hits Klein's Corners, it will go up 285 and take that same route, kind of skirting around the edge of Santa Fe, go to Lamel, and then return on that same pathway. But when it gets to Klein's Corners, at that point, it cuts off and goes onto Interstate 40 all the way across to South Carolina. And then from there, it comes back along Interstate 20 from South Carolina to WIPP. So it's two different paths in a way, if that makes sense.
Right, but it sounds like it's never going all the way to the end of 285 north. It's going actually by I-40 to 599 and skirting Santa Fe, no matter which way it's going, right? It's using 599, correct?
Yes.
Okay, well, that's something.
Hildegard, have a question? Well, 1 minute. Let's get you the mic so the people on Zoom can hear you.
Since there's a deadline of the 19th, which is Wednesday, and some concern about them getting these letters, I see that there's an email address on here. I'm going to email this gentleman, Ricardo Maristas, at the environmental department. But also, I wonder if it would be a good idea to telephone them starting tomorrow. And what is that telephone number?
I think they would only accept comments, written comments at this point on email or letter. And one of the things that we're going to do is hopefully you will write your comments today, this afternoon. We're going to take them, we're going to scan them in and give them, they have requested a file. So we will scan them, all your comments in, your letters, each individual letter, and give New Mexico Environment Department scans of your letters immediately, and then the hard copies before the deadline. So if you write your letter here today, we will ensure that it will get to NMED well before the deadline. More questions? Yes.
Yeah. Wouldn't it be more efficient to take care of the processing at the point of origin instead of shipping it around up and down the hill and back again? If it's not to mention waste of gas. I mean,
How logical of you. How we wish you were the head of the NMED and the head of the DOE to use that kind of good logic.
It makes no sense at all. And then I'm always concerned. Always be a plutonio es muerte, es muerte. I mean, water is life. Water is life. Plutonium is death. Why would we want it going up that hill? It scares me to death every time. especially when it's icy in the rare times I've done it like that. And there's water running below. Right, water.
Right. You're so right. Yeah. Other questions, comments? We're going to take like a little short. Yes, we have a Deborah on Zoom.
Yeah, so I just wanted to ask for those of us on Zoom, if we want to send our letter by email to be part of your file, can you put in the chat the email address we should send it to?
I think probably the best way right now for you to do that is to go to www.stopforeverwhip.org. On the homepage, if you scroll down, you will see a link that will take you right to the sample letter. You can click on that sample letter, put your own comments in, and when you click send, it goes right in.
So that's the website for 285 Alliance?
No, that's the website for Stop Forever WIPP. It's www. It says just the way it sounds, STOPFOREVER stopforeverwhip.org. And right there on the homepage, you just scroll down just a little bit, and you'll see send your comments here, and you can just click on that link.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. Stop Forever WIPP people, did I say that right? Yes, here we are. Is that what we want them to do? Okay, good. All right, so you want to get up, stretch around. We have one more very short PowerPoint, and then we'll help you write your letters. From all the information you can write your letters, there's water over there. We have these brilliant high fashion t-shirts for sale out front, and that wonderful sign that you can put in front of your yard, Another Family Against Forever WIPP. So, and these great buttons, really fun buttons. You can decorate your jean jacket just like in the old days. And I think a lot of people are doing that again. So stretch around, get a break, give us about 5-7 minutes, and then come on back, and we just have a little bit more about the permit itself and the public participation, the hearings that we'll hope you'll all participate in. So thanks again for coming. See you in a few. Folks, let's do this last short PowerPoint on the permit and the public process, how you can get involved and things to say. Again, we have some sample letters that you can take a look at, and we'll be handing out paper, and we encourage you to write today. If you're on Zoom, you can again go to our website, www.stopforeverwhip.org, and scroll down. You'll see how to put your comments in. We also have a couple people, Don Hancock and Deborah Reed, and Eileen will be back to have a little discussion that we can all just have a really nice discussion. So I just want to remind people, the Spanish translation people, go back. You're really invited to the Spanish section on your Zoom or here. Put your little earbuds in for the Spanish translation, and thanks to Cece. So let me get my notes, and then we'll go to the next PowerPoint. All right. Public participation. Are we ready? Yeah. Public participation is essential. I can't stress that enough. It is essential. Now that you know what WIPP is and what WIPP expansion are, you can put that knowledge to good use, because now we'll talk about the draft renewal permit and how you can influence what the permit requires. After this presentation, as I said, there'll be a panel with some great folks on it. Panelists will answer any of your additional questions, and then you can write your letters to MNED. I will say vigorous public participation in the permitting process is required by law. This is reflected in federal law and state law and in their implementing regulations. Public comment is considered an essential input into the final decision on whether to approve or deny the draft permit or to change conditions in the permit. The law even says that, quote, no ruling shall be made on permit issuance or denial without an opportunity for public hearing at which all interested persons shall be given a reasonable chance to submit significant data, views, or arguments. Next slide. Spanish translation is continuing. Yes, slide 2. In addition, in 2017, New Mexico Environment Department entered into an informal resolution agreement with the EPA because of allegations of discrimination in the department's public permitting process. NMED agreed to make sure that people who are not fluent in English have equal access to the same information about the permit and the permitting process that is easily available to English speakers. In New Mexico, people who don't speak English well are mostly Spanish speakers. This is why WIPP public notices and fact sheets are translated into Spanish and why there are interpreters at the public hearings. And here today, thank you, Cecilia. In fact, both the public notice and the fact sheet, NMED says it is seeking public comment about the permit. Your comments can definitely affect whether WIPP is expanded and operates forever or not. Next slide. Thank you. Under the law, a permit can be modified at any time. When a permit is modified or proposed, for modification, the process is limited to review and comment only on that particular proposed change. The volume of record modification that changed how waste volume is measured is an example of permit modification. Every 10 years, the permit is open for renewal. During renewal, the entire permit is open for public review and comment. This is where we are today. Permit renewal. Next slide, please. During permit renewal, there are 4 opportunities for public input or comment. First, before an application to renew, the permit is submitted to NMED. This happened in late 2019 and early 2020 when comments were accepted on the draft renewal application. Second, when an application to renew the permit is submitted to NMED. This occurred in March of 2020. Third, when NMED issues its draft renewal permit and a fact sheet about the draft permit and the WIPP facility. During the draft permit comment period, which began in December of 2022, members of the public can comment on the draft permit and request a public hearing. And fourth, before and during the public hearing. Next slide. We are currently in the comment period for number 3, commenting on the draft renewal permit. In December, NMED issued a draft renewal permit and a fact sheet. During the comment period, which ends at 5 p.m. on Wednesday, April 19th, you can tell NMED what you think about the permit, what is good about it and what should be retained, what is bad and should be changed or deleted, and what should be added. If you give your comments to NMED before the end of the comment period, your comments will be, quote, timely and must be considered. Your comments can be technical, but they can also simply be your own views or arguments. They can also cover social concerns, like how the permit could affect things like land use, the economy, the environment, or even your way of life. Next slide. So what's next? After this comment period, there will be negotiations about what changes to the draft permit should be considered during the hearing and what issues can be agreed on beforehand. Anyone who has requested a public hearing can participate in negotiations. If you are interested in requesting a hearing, MMD's WIPP fact sheet available on your website explains how to do that. A lot of comments will now support negotiators who represent your views when we are discussing how these issues will be addressed. For instance, a lot of comments asking for a specific end date will help get that added to the permit. If significant changes come out of the negotiations, a revised draft permit and a revised fact sheet will be issued before the public hearing. The hearing is the last opportunity in the public process to provide input and comments on WIPP's permit. Next slide. There are a variety of ways you can participate in the public hearing. Just as when the draft permit was issued, there is a pre-hearing period, usually 30 days, during which you can submit written comments. You can also submit written comments throughout the public hearing and make short oral comments at the hearing itself. You can cross-examine any of the witnesses at the hearing and can be cross-examined yourself. You will be sworn in before giving oral comments. Finally, you can also participate as a party to the hearing, which is a fairly complicated process, one I know somebody here is interested in. If this interests you, please contact us after the meeting today or through the stopforeverwhip.org website. You are need to request a hearing in your comments now to preserve your right to be a party at the hearing. Next slide. Now let's talk a bit about the draft permit. The draft permit is made up of 8 parts, which contain the required conditions regulating how WIPP must manage waste for disposal. These conditions are the heart of the permit. There are also numerous attachments to the permit which provide the details of how WIPP is to comply with the required conditions. In their application, the permittees, that is, WIPP, and their operators, contractors, SIMCO, requested dozens of significant changes to the permit, including removal of any defined end date and the addition of 2 replacement panels, panels 11 and 12. NMED has incorporated both of these requests into the draft permit. NMED has added their own conditions to the permit. Some of these are new, and some support or strengthen current conditions. Some are good, but some don't help stop WIPP expansion, or they could be stronger. Let's look at some of these important conditions in the draft permit. Next slide, please. Thank you. Some conditions are directly related to the WIPP expansion. NMED, thankfully, is strengthening the permit by validating WIPP as a pilot plant, and not the only repository for all defense true waste. The draft permit has a new condition requiring an annual report on DOE's progress towards siting another repository. However, there is nothing in the condition requiring that the DOE actually has to make any progress. And the report is not required to be available to the public in the WIPP Public Information Repository. Number 2, the permittees want to expand WIPP's underground footprint. We talked about that earlier. 2 new so-called replacement panels, panels 11 and 12, are allowed in the permit. This supports expanding waste disposal to the west and is an essential step in expanding WIPP and keeping it open for decades longer. Permitting these panels now is certainly premature,
and if approved, a bad precedent will be established to allow at least 6 more panels that the DOE has already planned. Number 3, NMED has added a new condition that triggers revoking the permit if the maximum waste volume is increased or changed by Congress. This good condition lets DOE and Congress know that there will be limits on future WIPP expansion. Number 4, the permittees want to remove any defined operational end date. The end date of operations was originally described as being at the end of 25 years or in 2024. The permittees have proposed having no end date at all and have stated that WIPP's capacity limit would not be reached until sometime after 2083. NMED has added a new permit condition that no longer mentions any definite end date and ties the end of waste disposal to when the permit expires or when WIPP has reached its maximum allowable waste volume. But the permit can be modified and the waste volume can be changed, as we saw with the volume of record modification previously. This new condition breaks promises made to the people of New Mexico. A definite end date, preferably tied to 2024, must be required. Number 5, the permittees want to expand the kind of waste allowed in WIPP to include surplus plutonium. The draft permit is silent on this point, but a condition must be added prohibiting the addition of this kind of waste, or, as the permit would describe it, prohibiting the addition of any new waste streams. Next slide, please. Other important considerations are not so directly related to WIPP expansion. Number 1, NMED has added a condition to prioritize New Mexico waste for disposal at WIPP. However, it doesn't prioritize cleaning up legacy waste, that is, waste that happened before 1999, waste generated before WIPP opened. New waste from pit production at Rannell is planned to take up more than half of WIPP's future capacity, requiring WIPP to stay open for more than another half century and expand beyond panels 11 and 12. This newly generated waste will transform WIPP from a cleanup site, as originally intended, into a dump for expanded pit production waste. Not just New Mexico waste, but New Mexico legacy waste must be prioritized in this condition. NMED wants more transparency and to make more information available to the public. Several conditions require expanded reporting on things like nearby oil and gas activities and generator sites. They also provide for more public meetings and for more public information. These are good conditions, and we want to support NMED in them and provide for more public involvement. Next slide. Next, we'll have a little panel discussion where people will discuss the importance of your participation in the permitting process and where you can ask lots more questions about any of the information presented today. Then we hope it's your turn to create your own comments. We have a sample letter and blank paper that's already been handed out, I believe. And you can write your own letter or just add your comments to those sample letters. And so now I'd like to invite Don Hancock from Southwest Research and Information Center to come up, Deborah Reed from Citizens for Alternatives to Radioactive Dumping and Concerned Citizens for Nuclear Safety. I hope I get all this right. And the wonderful Eileen O'Shaughnessy from DNA, Demand Nuclear Abolition. Okay, folks, take it away. Yay.
So who wants to start?
I'll start.
Okay, Deb, go for it.
I'm Deborah Reed. I'm research director for CCNS and CARD. And I prepared a little talk here. So New Mexico includes 2 national laboratories, hundreds of uranium mines and tailings, radioactive and mixed waste dumps either in the state or discharging into the state, along with other related nuclear activities. The first atomic bomb was tested here. Fires and releases have spread airborne contamination for hundreds of miles from Los Alamos National Lab and from WIPP. Now, WIPP is purposely releasing contaminated air into the public airspace, and LANL has plans to do the same as well. Our rivers, land, and air have become contaminated from nuclear activities and may never be fully cleaned up. Our people, including downwinders, have already suffered enough from radioactive exposures. More radioactive dumps, though, are being planned for our state, as well as the expansion of WIPP. And if nothing is done, our traditional economies of farming, ranching, tourism, and resource extraction will give way, and we will not be the land of enchantment anymore, but just one big nuclear and hazardous waste dump. It has been said that we should expand WIPP because it is our patriotic duty to do so. But I believe that we have done our duty many times over. It is time for others to share this burden of radioactive waste, or perhaps we should find a different way. This destruction of our state, our cities, and our neighborhoods doesn't have to happen. We can draw a line and we can say, this is enough. Keep to the promises you gave us that WIPP would be a limited project. Keep to the promise that it would end after 25 years. We just need to make it clear that we do not consent to WIPP that expands forever, and we do not consent to a constant stream of risky shipments through our neighborhoods for generations. Letting the Environment Department understand our concerns is one important way to do this, and a way to help shape the future that we really want for ourselves and for our families.
Thank you so much, Deborah. For those of you, probably many of you know, but Deborah Reed is responsible for one of the most powerful maps I think have ever been created. She's the creator, author of the Land, Air, Water Sacred Trust map. That is a bird's eye view of contamination and military nuclear activities impacts on waterways and the land of New Mexico, of our shared space of New Mexico. So I'm an educator, and I use that as a teaching tool all the time. I think I kind of just want to echo some of what Deborah just said and kind of do that little bit of a bird's eye view here and make some connections, because this issue it's part of something larger that is happening, okay? The expansion that is being proposed at WIPP in terms of the type of waste, the volume of waste, right, as well as keeping this dump site open longer. It's being potentially expanded in throughways. That's part of a buildup that is connected to nuclear weapons production. And Los Alamos National Labs is being tasked with building more plutonium pits, which are the spherical triggers for nuclear warheads currently, right now. And those two processes are happening at the same time. And it's really important that we put those two things in conversation with one another. So essentially, by expanding WIPP, we are legitimating, we are rubber stamping and saying, yes, we're okay with building more nuclear weapons in 2023, which, by the way, is a violation of international law, because a treaty has been ratified in the United Nations, the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, which says nuclear weapons are illegal, including the manufacturing, transportation, and storing of nuclear weapons. And right here in New Mexico, as we just heard from Deborah, we have one of the largest stockpiles, actual warheads in the world in Albuquerque. About 2,500 warheads at Kirtland Munitions underground storage facility. So that's the context. And there's one other piece that I want to add to the plutonium pit production context. Because I'm an educator and I care deeply about the liberatory possibilities of education. Unfortunately, education can also be used as a weapon. And in northern New Mexico right now, at Northern New Mexico College, the DOE has partnered with Northern New Mexico College, UNM, Los Alamos, and Santa Fe Community College to create what's called a workforce pipeline program. And what this is it's a program that is in part funded by New Mexico education dollars, which enrages me because that means we're using New Mexico education dollars to subsidize the Department of Energy. And what this pipeline program is doing is it's training students in front-line positions in the nuclear industry, okay? These are the most dangerous positions. These are the people who would be building the plutonium pits and getting more exposure. And these are also radiation cleanup positions. So this is part of the buildup. Like I just think it's important that we kind of zoom out and understand the context that this is happening in. The last thing I want to say is the importance of taking action. And I want to thank all of you for being here today. Everybody on Zoom, thanks for being here. You could be doing something else with your Sunday. It was mentioned that, in the past, these public comments had actually made a difference and that they've, influenced change. And that's really important to say because in our movement, which is a larger movement for nuclear abolition, we all just had a major win, and I think it's really important to celebrate wins, but a private company, Hotech International, was trying to bring all of the high-level waste from every power plant in the country to New Mexico, and after 6 years of coalitional work by the people of New Mexico, we passed a bill called SB 53 in the state senate. It was signed by the governor that same night. And essentially what that does is it stops that company from coming here unless the state consents or unless a permanent repository is built. And this one's ain't happening. You can quote me on it. So, it's just so important because, I don't know about you, but sometimes I'm not used to winning. I feel like I'm really used to fighting and losing a fight, and that's an example of very strong coalitional, multiracial people power winning. Okay, and New Mexico was targeted in that case because of the existing nuclear infrastructure here. That's the reason given is we're a dumping ground. Right? Which I want to just really clearly say that's also a form of racism because communities of color are targeted for dumping sites in New Mexico and also around the country. So in terms of taking action right now, it matters. And you writing comments matter. I know sometimes it feels like it doesn't matter, like it's sort of a dog and pony show, but I don't know. After the last couple of weeks, I have a real outlook on the, what can feel like a never-ending slog of doing this work. And I'd also lastly just want to say, sorry, you give a teacher a microphone. I just lastly want to lift up every person in this room, and especially my elders, folks who have been doing this work much younger than me. I was born in 1986, which is the same year that Chernobyl happened. And I see my work in nuclear abolition work as part of a long legacy of people who are trying to stop radioactive violence. It's been happening, that legacy before I was born. It'll continue long after because this waste and the remnants of these violent processes, they will be with us forever. 10,000 years, that presentation, after WIPP closes, NMED is supposed to certify that it will be safe for 10,000 years. Right? There's something off there because do you even know what 10,000 years? I can't conceive that. And so what it is human beings do part of the processes that involve us to keep something safe for 10,000 years. We need to stop creating these materials. It's incredibly violent. Radioactive waste, it's relentless of that violence, isn't it? It's ripping for an time. It's trauma, generational trauma that won't let us forget what lies at the center of every nuclear processing, which is violence. Thank you.
So I hope people have some questions. So let me just say kind of one quick thing. In the early days of WIPP in the 1970s, WIPP was going to be lower than for defense transuranic waste. It was going to be including for high-level waste. So the idea, and why did that not happen? Because, picking up on Eileen's point, some of our elders, some of people who have gone before, and some people in this room said, no, that wasn't going to happen. So WIPP has always been primed for expansion, and we've stopped some of those expansions in the past, and we can stop expansions in the present and in the future. But that's why this is a particularly key time, because the state, through the Environment Department, who works for the governor, can make some decisions. For state officials to make good decisions, whether in the 1970s or since then, they need people. They need people to tell them yes to do that, and we'll support you in doing that. So the Environment Department needs to hear our comments, and as the slideshow tried to stress, the Environment Department in some ways is proposing things and conditions that they've never proposed before. So they've heard us at some level, but we need to keep after them. We need to keep going for the state to really take as strong a position in the draft permit, and in some ways even stronger, as the slideshow mentioned, and some of us are doing. We're going to be asking the Environment Department to do even more in terms of restrictions than what they have proposed, but we need to have support. They and the governor need to hear from people that this is important, and we're with state officials who want to do the right thing. If we are, there's some fairly good chance that they're going to do some of the right things. So let's keep that in mind as we talk about our comments. Let's see what questions people have. Robin.
Questions from you all here, questions from friends online. Hildegard has a question.
Can somebody take the mic around?
Okay, thanks very much. All right, now I can hear. Don, is it your sense that the NMED now is pretty solid, that they have enough staff, they have enough money to do all the stuff we would like for them to do?
Well, that's right. That they're hopefully in the process of hiring another. So let's just put things in context. There are over 1,000 people who work at WIPP. There are currently 4 people on the WIPP team of the Environment Department that are supposed to be paying attention to what's going on. So, I mean, again, no, not denigrating at all those poor people who work hard, but, you know, they have a tough job. They're trying to hire a fifth person, which would be good. Of course, there's some people higher up in the Environment Department that, you know, do some work as well. But no, they don't. The short answer to your question is no, they don't have enough people. They need to have more. But part of their job can be very focused on putting some limits that we're talking about in the permit so that their job is less impossible in the future than it would be if surplus plutonium and other kinds of things are coming there and WIPP has to stay open forever.
Okay, other questions? Is that what I'm saying? Is there anybody else here? Louder, louder.
Oh, yes, good afternoon. My name is Lauro Silva. As Don just mentioned, back in the day, there were a lot of people involved. About 86% of the public in New Mexico was against the WIPP project. We talked to Rotary Clubs, we talked to student movements, we talked to community organizations, some Native American organizations, and we mobilized a groundswell against there. I don't see that kind of a united taking place right now. Certainly from the people that I see on the screen, I think I'm the only executive to see any surname person that I see on the screen. But that's not a criticism directly or anybody, but we only need to emphasize we need to organize a united front, and a mass movement of all kinds of organizations and individuals, whether it be a real estate group. Back in the day, John Lichtendorfer, myself, Linda Taylor, a bunch of other, we're very involved in organizing a big united front, organizing effort statewide. Yes, that's what we need to do now. We cannot letters, because letters may be a third and extent effective, but we need to, as Don mentioned, talk to the governor, talk to all of the congressional delegation, and talk to all of your state legislators and get them on board. Fist up your arms. Don't be shy. Bueno, that's all I have for now. Thank you.
Good to see you, Lauro. Lauro is one of the people who were with us from the very beginning, and it's wonderful to see you. I will say, there's a wonderful effort led by Cynthia Wheeler 285, a petition that went to the governor and caused her to recently, in the past year, write a letter to Secretary Granholm. And it's that noise, I believe, and some others of us believe, that caused MLD to rewrite the permit. That there was pressure put on the governor. She spoke to her secretary, and some of the things that we were demanding in that petition and that we have been saying are now included in some of the revisions that MMED has put into the draft permit. So, Laura, you couldn't be more correct, and the effort continues. So come on back, Laura. Help us organize. So who else? Yes, here. I'm sorry. Oh, back there. Somebody's got the mic already, and then here's next.
This sounds a bit Machiavellian. I know everyone in this room and probably on Zoom wishes there were less oil and gas activity in the area around WIPP. But I wonder if the argument could be made that expanding WIPP, expanding the mission of WIPP, expanding the physical size of WIPP, expanding the length of time that we will be operating would be bad for oil and gas.
Somebody want to speak to that from the panel, Don?
So, Eileen mentioned the SB 53 and the broad coalition that she talked about, which was true. A part of the coalition that I don't think she did mention was the oil and gas industry was very much with us on. They didn't want the whole tech facility because of concerns about the impact it would have on oil and gas. So, Mary, that's a not such a far out concept as you might think. It's a little more complicated with WIPP for a variety of reasons that I won't go into right now. But where the oil and gas industry does get concerned, you saw in the slideshow all these oil and gas wells around WIPP. If and when expansion of WIPP means that they're going to start shutting down oil and gas wells surrounding WIPP to expand that 16 square miles, at that point, I think the oil and gas industry would be concerned. DOE's strategy is to tell the oil and gas industry, we're not going to impact what you're doing. You can keep doing it. No problem. No problem. So that's part of the reason it's a little more complicated to get the oil and gas industry on board right now, because they are being told, we're not going to stop what you're doing.
Did you guys speak? They talk about the suitability of the Western geography to the expansion. The long time bring up the meetings we've been to. The Earth exists by geological consent, subject to change without notice. I think we need to be careful about this. Additionally, there is, as far as I'm concerned, in the environmental movement, there's quite a bit of racism. I have been to meetings where workers, Latinos, Chicanos, whatever you want to call us, try to approach people and they're disregarded. They don't want to be listened to. These are workers. These are people impacted by this. I see a lot of racism in the environmental movement. They're just too damn hard for us.
I just had a question for the panel. If you had any insight on how the bilingual record got changed a couple of years ago. I didn't live here then, I wasn't on top of it. But that seemed like a real game changer to open the door for the surplus plutonium. And I'm asking so that we can be on top of it so that it doesn't happen again. Because that was very significant, I think, based on my reading of all of this.
I think you're right. A number of people in the room are involved with that. The short, cynical answer to the question is that former Governor Martinez and the DOE struck a deal to get the volume of record done before Governor Martinez left office. So a number of us in the room fought very hard against that during the hearing process, took it to court afterwards, are actually in the permit renewal going to again attack the volume of record to get it changed. So the fight is not over. But yes, a number of us knew at the time that was a big deal. And, did they put out press releases saying the governor and DOE struck a deal? Answer's no. But the actions that the Environment Department took, the speed in which things happened, how they wouldn't, as was mentioned, they wouldn't even let us talk about how this relates to expansion. The word expansion was prohibited from even being used in that process. So that's a battle that we lost that we're still after trying to win in some way. But you're absolutely right. The other thing that I guess I want to be clear about the volume of record is that the way it is worded is DOE can further change how it's calculating the waste at any time without the state approval. That's that whole thing is totally outrageous too. So yeah, they're going to keep, if they're able to keep the volume of record, they're going to keep 6.2 million cubic feet is going to be 10 million cubic feet, 20 million cubic feet. They'll just keep redefining it. Anybody who knows anything about accounting, who knows if you're keeping two sets of books, something's wrong. And there is keeping two sets of books on the volume.
Oh, you did a comment in your.
Yeah.
Oh, good. Please, yes. Yeah, absolutely. People, there are some of us who are going to be challenging the volume of record again in the renewal process. Comments along that line would be very helpful. So yes, please feel free to add that in. Thanks.
There was another person right here. No.
Yeah, I was just wondering, is there a correlation between the states about the routes they're traveling? Have we checked with other states?
Don't you talk about what you're doing?
It's really hard to contact people in other states. It's hard enough here in New Mexico. But we are trying to do it. And one way that's starting to be kind of productive is talking to different faith groups in other states. And so one is a Quaker group in South Carolina. Another is a Catholic group, Pax Christi in Texas. We're going to be talking to the Unitarian Universalists. And I'm trying to get these people to communicate with each other because I think they could be really powerful. Other than that, I don't know what else to do. And I'm looking for suggestions.
Yeah, let me just add a couple of things. Insofar as people in other states, talk to them about it, etc. Scott Kovac and I from Nuclear Watch and some other people from New Mexico are going to be in Washington, D.C. the week after next with about 50 people from different organizations around the country working on these DOE sites that we're talking about. And so, yeah, there is a coalition of work going on. One of the fun things about those meetings is walking into the 4-star building at the Department of Energy with people that DOE likes to play against each other. You folks in Idaho need WIPP to keep open, or otherwise you get to keep your race. You folks in South Carolina need to have WIPP expanded, or otherwise all this plutonium is going to stay in South Carolina, et cetera. Well, we go in with people from all of those states together to tell DOE, no, that's not the case. So more of that work needs to be done. But yeah, and so we are conscious of the need for that. There are efforts being made, but as Cindy said, there's more that can and needs to be done. Thanks.
We have a couple of people that are on Zoom who have comments or questions. Barbara Chatterjee.
Thank you. This has been a really enlightening session today, and I really appreciate all of you sponsors, the participants, for the very clear information you are sharing with us. I have maybe two questions. One is the 2014 incident where we had the mispacked material. What kind of controls can we expect in that, and what might we want to write into our letters on this point? Because oversight has been a really big problem, and we need guarantees, I think, in that area that we have never been able to really enforce. And my second question has to do with the expansion that's clearly being planned with sections 11 and 12. Does that just replace lost space from the 2014 event, or does that already include a larger area regardless of the geological issues about that location? Those are my two questions. Thank you.
Deb,
Well, in terms of the first one, in terms of oversight, unfortunately, Lano, which made this mistake as a generating site and putting the wrong kitty litter in, which created essentially an explosive mixture. And as we said, there's hundreds of drums with that same mixture already in WIPP. And they were rushing to get all the waste off the hill because they got a bonus for getting that waste off by a certain date. And when the workers came to them and said, hey, smoke and orange foam is coming out of these drums, and they were told, just put the lid on it and ship it. And then they shipped another shipment after the waste or the waste drum exploded. After that had happened, they continued to ship a bunch of waste, another shipment down to WIPP, which was marooned down there and is now sitting for millions of dollars a year being stored at Waste Control Specialists, which is a mixed waste dump just across the border, which, by the way, discharges their effluent into our state. So they're just over the border in Texas. Now, there was an accident report which just lambasted everybody at WIPP and at Lano. And then they talked about how they were going to do all this, safety oversight. Well, in fact, that's where they started coming up with this safety as a journey. They were asked, well, how are you doing with your safety culture? And the response was, well, safety is a journey. It's not so much about the destination. They repeated this just, I think, a few months ago up at Lano. It's not the destination. That's not really important. It's the journey. Well, I'm sorry. They're lost down some back road. They don't have a map. They don't know where they're going, and they're lost on their safety journey. Safety, they're just as bad as they were before. They really don't care. Now, years ago, we had the Environmental Evaluation Group, which oversaw WIPP, and they oversaw the generators sites. They were paid for by DOE, but they were answered to the state. At some point, DOE said, we don't need this oversight anymore. We've been doing so great. And they got rid of the Environmental Evaluation Group. They also don't have, they do have a certain oversight, sort of an internal oversight at the lab when they found all kinds of safety problems there. Again, the response was, let's get rid of the oversight group. They're causing so many problems finding our problems. They haven't gotten rid of that oversight yet, but that's the response that Lano and WIPP have. Let's just get rid of the people who are finding the problems, so that it's sort of like if you don't test, then there's no COVID, right? So yes, we need to get more hardcore about safety. Safety is not important to these guys. Getting more waste in WIPP, making more pits at Lano, when they, not improving for year after year after year after year after year, when they are told they've got these problems, you've got this other problem, and they just never fix it. So we have to get hardcore on these guys to get them to actually see safety as their first. This should be first before anything else. It should be first before they can expand. This should be first before they add pit production. They should be able to show that they're safe, but when they're clearly not. And then,
so wait, Don, did you have something you wanted to say about this? And you have two more people online who have questions or comments.
What did Barbara's second question that she wanted to? Didn't she have a second question that I've forgotten?
Yeah, I'm here. I think my second question, whether these proposed sites 11 and 12 would make up just the loft space because of the accident and other mismanagement of space, or are we actually already physically expanding it? And then I want to comment, should we write something in our letters that says we want these oversight boards to be more active, more reporting more transparently to the public? Is this something that we should be putting in our letters?
Yes, you can you can always ask for more oversight. I think that the thing that's important is to insist on clear language and prohibitions in the permit that the Environment Department actually does enforce. One of our recent frustrations with them is they allowed DOE, you heard in the presentation, that rooms and panels are supposed to be 13 feet high. They allowed DOE build panel 8, 16 feet high, and said, well, 13 feet and 16 feet are about the same. Well, most people would not say that's true, but again, they need to be clear. There needs to be clear language in the permit that they need to be willing to enforce. The answer to your first question is WIPP has been mismanaged from the very beginning in 1999 and 2000. So this is sophistry to say that they just need to replace from contamination or from space that they have misused. That's no excuse. The 8 panels were designed to handle 6.2 million cubic feet. My view would be if you build something, you can only use how much it fits. And so if you mismanage it, so less than 6.2 million cubic feet fits into WIPP, that's the way it is. The point that is worth making, if some of you want to, is the 6.2 million cubic feet that was described in the CNC agreement and in the law is not, and in the permit is not, you absolutely have to put in exactly 6.2 million cubic feet. It's actually the limit. And most of us know when we have limits, we maybe not be able to go up to the limit. Sometimes you don't, even if the speed limit is 75, do you always have to go at 75? If the speed limit is 35 down the street, do you always have to go at 35? So that's a wrong way of thinking about things. That there is no entitlement for WIPP to be able to go on forever. Tell them that. Tell the environment. The state has the authority to say no. The permit can shut WIPP down, which is not what they're going to do immediately, but they need to be under pressure to put stringent conditions on and then enforce them.
Thanks. So we have another person. I think we have another person on Zoom. David?
Yeah, hi. Many thanks to everyone. This has just been so informative and galvanizing, everything that's been presented. And I was particularly struck by Laura's comment that compared to times in the past that, in spite of these excellent efforts, that we don't have this groundswell of a larger movement. And I'm wondering about, next steps from today. What can be done in terms of generating a larger movement? And, some specific questions I had for Cynthia. I was in Santa Fe. Have we been in touch with the UU congregation, Unitarian Universalists? They're very action-oriented. Is Retake Democracy engaged in this particular movement and effort, and to what extent? And that whole hearing that Anna Hansen, County Commissioner, sponsored in Santa Fe, a couple of weeks ago, what are the linkages here? Just curious about that.
What good questions and comments. I think one thing I want to say is this thing that's coming up, our deadline on Wednesday is super important, but then it's not over. And the whole issue here is that we have to influence the Department of Energy, the Environment Department, to stand up and say no and push back on this really powerful federal agency. And the person who really is the one who's going to be making that decision is the governor. And so after this opportunity for us to make public comments, I'm looking at, what we have to do next is talk to the governor in many ways
and I'm not sure how to do that. I think, that's something that more minds than just one can come up with better ideas. But look for ideas that people might be contacting you to say, let's do this thing to try to get the governor's attention. And so when you see that, help out. That would be, you really need paper for that. There was something else. The person who, up until now, has been in charge of running the transportation of the troops was in one of these meetings with Commissioner Hansen and the public, and she made the comment that they are so safe. She was so confident with it, unless Murphy's Law came into play. And I was stunned that, what? I mean, we're dealing with nuclear waste. You can't have a safety journal, like you said, Deborah. It's got to be safe, period. And you're not going to be able to deal with Murphy's Law coming into play. So that's it.
Eileen?
Yeah. Well, I just also want to echo what Sylvia and Lalo brought up. And this question is really important about, arrival, because I think nuclear issues are at the intersection of so many issues, and racism is right there. And I do want to just say that in the movement, we need to do an anti-racist work. That's really important for us as white people. And we need to do work around challenging sexism and homophobia. That's important for us to be able to work together and to kind of link arms. The issues themselves, it's like if we look at poverty, if we look at class, if we look at schooling in Mexico, I think that we need to be looking at connections between the presence of the nuclear industry and injustice in general. Because where we put our energy, where we put our federal dollars, that's a form of watering something. And what we water grows. So in this state, what we're watering is nuclear. And so I think, so one way to think about answering your question is we've got to make connections across other movements. People that are working on climate change, people that are working on poverty and challenging racism, all of these things connect to nuclear. They really do. And with climate change, I want to make a quick connection here. People are saying that, or some people are saying that nuclear energy is clean or green, or somehow that would solve our climate change problems. I know everyone in this room knows that that's not true, but that's education. We need to be clear about articulating why nuclear power is going to generate more waste. It's going to involve uranium mining, which is on indigenous lands, and it's not the solution, right? So that's one way to think about how to bring more people into this movement and raise passion.
And I also want to say that one of the biggest problems is that people, you may have seen some of our ads that say, oh, I almost forgot about WIPP. Well, this is the reality, is that, in the last 20 years, of course, there's people who have grown up since then. There are people who have moved to the States since then. And there's just people who just do not know what WIPP is. I cannot tell you the number of people when I mention WIPP, they go, oh, what is that? So I think one of the biggest things that I personally am planning on doing between now and the permit hearing is to try to put out information about what WIPP is, or that WIPP even exists. So I hope that everyone who is participating in this program today, attending this program, will talk to your friends, family, and acquaintances, and start just mentioning that there is a WIPP. It's a waste isolation pilot plan, and tell them what it is. It's for defense, transuranic or plutonium contaminated nuclear waste, and that this involves transportation from all over the country into New Mexico and into southeast New Mexico, just to explain to people that this project exists, that what it is, so that people know about it. And that is a big thing that we need to do right now is just to get the word out on what WIPP is.
We have a couple of people in here in person and one person online. Let's go to the one person online first, and then we'll take care of the couple of people here. Rachel? Rachel, are you there?
Yes, hi, thank you. I'm one of Eileen's current students. I'm grateful to be here. My question was, most of the waste that's stored at WIPP, is that all coming from Lanel, or is it coming from lots of places? And if WIPP is closed in 2024, where is Lanel and maybe other places? Like, where are they planning to store their waste that's generated from 2024 and beyond?
Good questions. Don?
So, half of the waste that's currently in WIPP came from Idaho, was shipped from Idaho. Virtually all of that waste originated in Colorado at the Rocky Flats plant, which was the plant that for 35 years made all of the plutonium pits for nuclear weapons in the United States. So waste was shipped from Colorado to Idaho, Idaho to New Mexico. That was part of the politics. You folks in Idaho can only get rid of your waste if you help put New Mexico waste open. So that's part of the plan people off against each other. And then there was some other waste directly from the EP flats to WIPP. So Los Alamos has only shipped about 11 or 12% of the waste that's in WIPP came from Los Alamos. So it is an important but a more minor player in terms of the waste that's there. So WIPP is not primarily for New Mexico waste; it's primarily for waste from other places. And in terms of, as a friend in Idaho always says, is when people start talking about where's waste going to go, well, let's talk about where it is. It is in Idaho. It is in Washington State. It is in South Carolina. It is in Tennessee. It is in California. So it's in Illinois. So the options are leave it where it is, which is going to happen to some extent. Insofar as you're creating more, you're saying waste is going to stay there. So that's a point of having it safer where it is. Irene's important point is if you don't want to have more, you stop making it in all the places we just mentioned, New Mexico and the other places as well. So that's really important. But and obviously there is disagreement in the larger movement about this. But if long-term you need to put waste underground in geologic formations, there need to be others of them. That's why the push is to say, let's start with looking for other sites. An important first step to that we're talking about is first we need to agree what the requirements of other sites are going to be. What are the technical, what are the acceptable conditions going to be, which is not the case right now. The two standards that exist for geologic repository are the WIPP standard, which is not adequate, and the Yucca Mountain standard in Nevada, which is not adequate. So we first need to have this national discussion about new standards, which needs to start right now.
I think Jonah wants to say something about this too. Jonah from Concerned Citizens from Local Safety.
Hi, I wanted to respond to your question about the race, because right now Lanel is saying, Los Alamos National Laboratory is saying that they want to leave 200,000 cubic yards of waste buried at Area G and other large dumps. That waste is already migrating to the regional drinking water aquifer. So when you hear the propaganda that it's expanding WIPP or clean up Lanel, that's not true. And we need to raise awareness that in order to protect the water, the drinking water aquifer underneath Los Alamos National Laboratory, we have to excavate
remove the waste from the volcanic tuff where it is buried. I just want to add that because there is this myth that expansion at WIPP will result in cleanup at Randall. So thank you.
So the Environment Department needs to insist on the excavation that Janie just talked about, which is a separate matter. There's a separate permit for Los Alamos from the WIPP permit, but these things are connected. Thank you.
It's all connected in New Mexico. And the fact that, as Eileen talked about the treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons, if you're so moved, please get involved with the International Campaign for the Abolition of Nuclear Weapons, the ICAN, to start questioning our elected officials and DOE and NNSA. What's the plan to come into compliance with the treaty when the pressure starts to be so great that they can't make nuclear weapons anymore? And so, I'm a dreamer. That's who I am. But it's really important for young people to be asking that question. What's the plan going forward? So thank you.
John, I think John has his hand up.
Yes, thank you, Robin. I'm John Wilkes, the Vice President of Veterans for Peace, Albuquerque. Tonight, you're going to write your comments soon thereafter. And then, as we've said, there'll be a hearing period that'll be down the road several weeks or months from now. In between that, I'd like to invite you to Earth Fest on the 22nd of the month. It's 22nd, 23rd. Veterans for Peace is going to host this coalition at a table. We'll have the same items at that event that are out in the hallway. This is a chance to talk to neighbors, youth, people who don't know, people of all walks. They'll be there. It would be wonderful if you would attend, wear your T-shirt, wear your button, and just engage people in the crowd. That is the way we're going to talk about individuals. Yes, we're going to get organized to approach organizations, but let's do something in the next week that will have an effect in every week thereafter.
Good point.
Thank you very much.
Good point, John. I just want to say that the first that John just spoke of is at La Montanita in Marquette in Albuquerque from 10 to 3 on both Saturday and Sunday. And I understand that there's something happening in Santa Fe also at the La Montanita Co-op. Is that true, Johnny? Well, there's some Earth Day event here at Santa Fe next weekend. So for those of you that are online in Albuquerque, I hope to see you at La Montanita Co-op and find out in Santa Fe what's going on here. So I think if there are no more questions, we have 2 more 9, okay? Pretty soon, we should close up this section so that you have some time to write your letters. And yes, I see you with your hand up. And also, Eileen is going to share one of her anti-nuclear songs with us as we write our letter. So that's a real treat. So let's take this women right here in person, and then we'll go to the Zoom.
Right there behind.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you. This has been wonderful. I just wanted to make a comment. Pedro Reyes, who is a famous artist from Mexico City, he's known as the artist against the bomb. And he has a show right now at Site Santa Fe. And as a part of that show, he has a documentary that he created that speaks to the problem of mining uranium and what it is doing to the indigenous people in the state, mainly the DNA. And one interesting thing I learned, I think I learned it correctly, is that once uranium needs to stay in the ground, that once it is mined, it becomes toxic, once it hits the air. But it's a wonderful video, and he has a wonderful show, Pedro Reyes, Artist Against the Bomb.
Thank you so much. Oh, and the show ends May 1st at Site Santa Fe. It's right across the street from the Railroad Farmers Market.
And I believe that the Sacred Trust map is displayed there also.
Okay, great. That was Sacred Trust. Okay, back to Zoom, our friends on Zoom. Who do we have? Deborah.
And then
I just want to go back, and maybe Laura is going to speak to this too, about, I understand the first priority is really to get as many letters written as possible by Wednesday, but if we're really going to grow this movement, just a simple practical question is, we were to contact friends, allies, organizations, how do they get involved? I mean, I learned about this meeting through 285 Alliance, and I understand there's a collective here, which is great, but is the central organizing point the website? I'm sorry, it's Stop WIPP Forever. And people need a place to go to connect. They need it just very simple and practical.
Yes. Yes, you are so right. And that's why about a year and a half, 2 years ago, we enlisted the aid of some of our senior friends to be our social media and designers of the Stop Forever WIPP website and Facebook and Instagram. And so people can be there. We urge people to be there. We update it every week. Tyrell and Candace from Zoom put something there almost every single week on that website. And there's lots of background information for the WIPP timeline. Right now, you can submit your sample comments there, or see a sample comment and submit your comments there. So go to our Stop Forever WIPP Facebook page, go to our Stop Forever WIPP website, and we encourage all organizations to come forth and join the coalition. We meet regularly on Friday afternoon, not the best time, but you can bring a beverage of your adult beverage of choice. You will join us on Friday afternoon from 2 to 3:30, sometimes 2 to 4. We'd love to have it, and the more organizations and the more energy we can put into this coalition, the better it is. So, yes, Deborah, you're right. So right. So, does somebody else have something? Yeah.
More on that. So, somebody wanted to actually take action beyond this letter writing effort. They should go to the website to get on your newsletter, your email list to be notified about the next time that action is needed. Is that what you would suggest?
Yes, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. And if you are interested in becoming more a party to the hearing and want to present important technically or community-based information on WIPP, you can see Don or Deborah or any of the other people here to really get more active and organize your community and get more active in the work that we're trying to do. So yes, we need all of you to help with that. So yeah.
So that's stopforeverwhip.org, and you can contact to get on the newsletter list. And also, if you are interested in taking action or being part of the coalition, you can contact us there through that website, through the contact on that website too, so that then somebody from the coalition will get back to you on that.
Debbie, did you have something else, or Don, or who, one last time? Cynthia?
Yeah, Barbara, you mentioned that you heard about this event through 285 Wild. And so if you're interested, I assume you're on that list. That's kind of a local organization where we get together and do strategy sessions and things. And so you can contact 285 Alliance at gmail.com and suggest getting together with people that are in that area if that's where you live.
Anybody else have anything you want to say about this? Well,
just let I see Bob and Lado just their hands up.
Yeah. Okay, Bob and then Lyle.
Can you hear me okay?
Yep. Gotcha.
Okay, good.
I just wonder where our two senators have come out on this, if there's been any communications from them, or have they expressed anything? So just wondering about that political end of it. Are there any help or not? The other thing I had a question about was in 1961, there was the Genome Project down there in Carlsbad area, which spewed plutonium all over the area. And and it's, this gets into environmental racism. And I wondered if there's been any studies or health effects from that the people there maybe are aware of in conjunction with this WIPP project, where the accumulation of that stuff must be pretty heavy. So I was just wondered about that too, if there's any connection from there, and what our senators are saying about this. So thank you very much for this great conference.
Thanks, Dad. Not bad. Diane?
So the senators aren't saying much about WIPP. Waiting for the governor's lead, I guess, is what I would generally say. Certainly, as other things that people can do down the line to talk to the senators about it would be important. Senator Heinrich is in the strategic location in Congress because he sits on the Appropriations Committee and the Energy Committee, which are the two committees that have two of the three committees that have something to do with WIPP. So, yes, a variety of people have contacted them, but again, you need to be in touch with them. But it has been some monitoring done at the site that I've mentioned in terms of one of the Atoms for Peace program, so-called Atoms for Peace program in the late 50s and early 60s. And the most recent data that I've seen doesn't show significant levels of surface plutonium contamination at the site.
Thanks, Don. So, Lotto Sarah?
Yes. I want to thank everybody for putting this together, spearheading this effort, getting the information out, of course, to website and social media. Nonetheless, I want to emphasize how important it is to have a team that is going to be able to reach out to the Pueblos, to the Nene, to the Chicano communities, student movements, the unions, to local governments, and to mobilize the kind of support that's needed with the information and the historical record that has been established. I think that there's been serious, diligent efforts that have been made by this group and others, but we still need to get a mass movement in New Mexico in order to be able to stop this, because they're going to push and push and push. And I agree, we need to meet with the governor. We need core teams that are going to lead the effort. They're going to lead the effort by actually making physical contact, going to their meetings, and being able to give the presentations. I think the presentation here needs to be replicated at least 50 times throughout Las Cruces, Silver City, Carlsbad, Roswell, other parts, Taos, Las Vegas, other places up in the Farmington northwest corner. We need to get the information out that is so valuable. And I want to thank all of you again for all of your efforts, all of these years, for continuing this effort. We realize that the dangerous in this karst topography that created the bottomless lakes and the Carlsbad Caverns and that whole area of limestone formations from the water runoff from the Capitan Reef down into the WIPP site itself is going to continue. It's not going to go away unless we have that kind of extreme drought that there won't be any water running anywhere there. But we need to be able to mobilize local communities, whether it be the get ACLU involved. This is a serious civil rights matter. We need to look at the biological impacts. I'm talking about the genetic impacts of future generations as DNA has been affected by the radiation. We don't talk too much about that, but the medical community needs to be contacted so that they step forward also. So the core group that is here today and on Zoom, I think is very important. I have been doing a lot of diligent work, but it needs to be expanded. We can no longer be in this kind of an isolated area of intellectual scientific research data that is being presented here. It's so valuable to the rest of our communities. So thank you very much, and that's all I have for today. But I encourage you to consider finding some funding to organize a good core team that's able to go out to these communities. At one point, people said, "No, we don't need this to be an organized effort. We need it to be a scientific and kind of a dissemination." But to disseminate it, you need to talk to people directly, face to face, in these different organizations and communities. Thank you again.
Thank you, Otto. Just also want everybody to know that today, everything that we did and talked about today was recorded and will be up on our website. So you can download sections of it, you can share it with anyone. Please do that. And now I think I would love to invite the ever wonderful Miss Eileen O'Shaughnessy up to share a song or two with us where we write our letters. So pick up your pen, open your ears, and my dear friend, Eileen. All right, there's nothing I love doing better than singing to a bunch of people that are taking action. So I'm going to serenade you. This song is a song that I actually wrote about a different nuclear waste dump, but unfortunately it applies here as well in many ways. So this is a song called The Hole in the Ground, and I wrote it about the mixed waste landfill dump, which is, if you live in Albuquerque, it's a local dump there, Kirtland's Road, south of the airport, and north of Isleta Pueblo. And it's a dump that's 2.5 acres, and it's unlined, and it's full of mixed materials, radioactive, hazardous chemical waste. It's above the aquifer. It also contains potentially explosive metallic sodium, which is a really great concern. And it's near high populations of people. So that's an issue that a number of groups, especially Citizen Action, which is Dave McCoy's group, has worked tirelessly on. So it's called The Hole in the Ground, and there's one worrying about it up. In the case of that dump, that's something that we weren't. We want it to be safely excavated. Obviously, calling it WIPP is not necessarily possible. But the full science is stop making those materials. Just if you look at time, that's round one, you look up nobody cares about it. It was really bad. Yeah. The holidays
just me. So say the sea, just what water, super, I think. It takes to see what is buried deep down, to clean up that hole in the up there with their looking down. They don't care what's buried underground. See, it's time that the people come together now. Oh, it takes patience. Oh, it takes wisdom. Oh, it takes all of us to clean up the hole in the ground, to see what is buried deep down, to clean up that hole in the ground. So it's time that the people come together now. So it's time we face our demons and clean up that hole in the ground. So it's time that's the night and clean up that hole in the ground.
All right. Thank you so much. Okay, I'll sing you one more while you're writing your letters. And I do have I have a couple albums with me. I have a band called Eileen and the In-Betweens, and actually we have a show this week in Santa Fe at Tumbleroot Brewery here in Santa Fe on Wednesday evening. But we released our fourth album in the fall, and back to Deborah's map that's been discussed. Deborah's map is on the CD cover of this album, and it's a powerful teaching tool, as I mentioned. So if you want some music and the map as well, those albums are available for $10. Okay, this song is it's just about kind of how getting ourselves out of the mess that we've gotten ourselves into as human beings. It's called Get It Together. This is the call that will not drop. This is the train that will not stop. This is the friend that will not walk away. Your radio belongs in the ground. Am I right side up or am I upside down? This is the call that will not drop. This is the train that will not stop. This is the friend that will not walk away.
running just as fast as we can. When we fall, how hard we gonna land? This is the call that will not drop. This is the train that will not stop. This is the friend that will not walk away. How many bombs? How many schools? How long are we gonna play this role? This is the call that will not drop. This is the train that will not stop. This is the friend that will not walk away. Looking up and looking up and looking for you. Looking up and looking up and looking for you. Looking up and looking up and looking for you. Get it together. Running just as fast as we can. When we fall, how hard we gonna land?
All right. How's the letter writing coming? All right. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, really keep writing those letters. Thanks to Eileen for just coming down and up, or wherever we are, coming over and sharing this day with us and her music, and you all for being here. So thanks. Bye, everybody. Keep keeping on, and go to www.stopforeverwhip.org. Write your letters and stay tuned in. Thanks to all of you. Happy Sunday afternoon.